So in your inquiry assignments, again, consider your phenomenological question of inquiry. So your inquiry is driven by this initial question that you posed in your proposal. And furthermore, it aims in some way to create more questions, as we discussed last class. So you're going to have more questions, but you're going to be returning to this original one. And again, in thinking through these questions, you're not seeking an answer necessarily or an absolute truth to conclude, but rather you're aiming to sort of inhabit the question that you're asking, to live inside it and to attend to the how of something as it's lived. So in doing this, your methods will be intentional. So the design and form of this piece really matters. So think of this inquiry assignment as an artistic composition. Your composition will have a sense of becoming, so that it's not stagnant, because the lived experience is moving, is felt, is breathing. So you should be presenting your inquiry in a way which speaks to its movement, that the themes and knowledge that you're sharing are not static or stable, that there's an essence of ambiguity sort of and temporality here. And that again, you're not presenting others' opinions, finding out facts, or proposing how you think the topic ought to be lived. This isn't a moral analysis, but rather your inquiry should be fueled by an attitude of questions, a search and a research, as Van Ranen would say, about how this topic is emerging, how it is lived in moments with others, and what meaning might gesture toward, what meaning is emerging from here that can be gestured toward, and considering what themes might be nodding through the series of moments. Is there some kind of patterning or some kind of rhythm that you're noticing? These moments don't necessarily, again, need to be big. Ordinary, everyday moments have a lot to say, as you've been thinking with in your portfolio entries. But noticing this requires an artful attention, and a way of paying attention that we've been nourishing throughout your portfolio assignments. So we've been discussing living inquiry as a process. So in your inquiry assignment, you will not present the phenomenon as a thing. So for example, this is a picture of my sister who is courageous because she does this and this. This is what she says about courage. But rather, in this example of courage, you will be narrating a poetic, richly descriptive narrative of how courage is lived in the world with others and how it gathers meaning as a transformative process that is living, nuanced, and perhaps tensioned, perhaps imperfect. It alludes to an openness and aspects of some sort of unknowability. So in this way, an inquiry might be beautiful because of its complexity and perhaps because of its contradictions, not because it represents a common, familiar, or easily palatable image of what courage is or should be. We're not presenting what we already know or what we've already heard. So if you're able to show the movements and processes of courage, this will offer a much more interesting narrative with felt value over something that is static and wholly knowable. So when you're working with your inquiry assignments in these projects, consider the rubric that's posted on eLearn. And remember again that this is not about people's opinions or taking a moral stance, but rather you're paying attention to the nuances and the livedness of the topic. So use poetics to speak to the depth of what makes this phenomenon what it is. Try to avoid coming directly at it or becoming a cliche. And this means that we aren't presenting the topic in a way that only speaks to its positivity or its desirable effects. In order to create dimension and depth, we also need to attend to the tensions, the contradictions, the juxtapositions. This doesn't need to necessarily be harmonious and pure in order to be beautiful. So in your inquiry assignments, you can either compose carefully crafted pedagogical narration on PowerPoint using images and text. Or you can use, or you can think with, a visual textual written paper. This will be a more conventional written paper with images included. So this paper might take a narrative approach and should use APA style and referencing. Both formats should be APA style. The paper should be around 1,100 to 1,500 words, excluding the title page and references. So with either format, you must follow APA guidelines and include a reference list, please. And if you need some support with APA, there is a link posted on eLearn. I can help you with that. So in your inquiries, you're attending often to the minor, the mundane, the little moments of intersection and correspondence between things where, as a teacher or researcher, you zoom in and attend. In this meeting place between at least two components, there is that space between where if each is open, something might happen. And an openness requires that we're not seeking to fully understand or consume the other into what we already know, but rather to try and suspend ourselves and meet in this space of difference and hover there for a while. And much of this kind of attention requires a slowing down, and as Cristina Delgado Ventimiglia would say, an opening up of processes, so that we're not moving quickly through things, but we're slowing down and we're cracking open. So attending to the ethics of being in this middle space is not necessarily empathy or understanding the other against the backdrop of the self, but rather it's getting close to, it's about reshaping, responding in the midst of that unknowability, where a capacity to act is altered. So what is an encounter? It's not necessarily good or bad, but things that provoke us to think and feel. And Anna Singh writes that these spaces require precarity. She says that precarity is the condition of being vulnerable to others. Unpredictable encounters transform us. We're not in control even of ourselves. So, she also writes that learning through experiencing, not through enacting blueprints. And with this said, we are open and we are attending to the emerging, but that emergence emerges because of a particular condition that has been prepared and decided upon by the educator. And Pasini Kajavalkine and Kocher say that to attend to an encounter is to pause, to linger with, to dwell in, to take time with. And these are some orientations that you can bring with you into your inquiries. A few more thoughts on encounter. When we think about an encounter as a moment of meeting where things and forces, humans and non-humans, come together in spaces of difference, it's unlike a recognition. An encounter disrupts the representation of something always already in place, our habitual way of being and acting in the world. We consider what happens, what it sets in motion when forces meet, touch, attend, open, respond. And finally, instead of planning or expecting, an encounter looks for the not yet known. It is marked by a sense of not knowing, a hopeful waiting. And this is also from Material Encounters, the book. So when you're in an encounter, there is a possibility to affect and be affected by. And also, this isn't necessarily between human and material or between human and human. This encounter happens beyond the human as well. And Deleuze and O'Sullivan write that affect is the effect a given object of practice has on its beholder and on its beholder's becomings. In this sense, affect is much more than emotion. It is the medium through which bodies sustain and transform each other. So in Miriam Cooley's article this week, she speaks to research creation, and she writes that modes of life inspire ways of thinking. Modes of thinking create ways of living. So in thinking about research in this way, we're considering research as entangled in the movements of life. And pedagogy is also entangled in these movements of life. They're really interdependent. And in this way, we can think of our methods of research, of thought, not as separate from, but deeply situated in the experience of a lived moment, not something that just comes from outside and is plopped up over top of a lived moment. Our methods are of the lived experience, where nothing exists outside, but rather multiple components are active in the composition of a moment, including our methodologies, our interpretation, and our response. And this brings me to think about a quote by John Law when he says that methods produce realities. The ways in which we attend to and speak of phenomena creates the ways in which these phenomena shape and are shaped by the world. So therefore, it matters which methods we use to interpret and represent a phenomenon. We've discussed how language is more than a tool of communication, how language creates worlds, it creates meanings. And we can also think of methods in this way, of writing, photography, and videography as creating meaning, not only as separate from or representing meaning, but as actively a part of it. So why does this matter? Why in this course are we considering the arts of photography and video as a methodological focus? What do the artistic methodologies allow for pedagogically as we conceptualize our roles as teachers and researchers? And Eisner writes that artistic processes promise to increase the variety of questions that we can ask about the educational situations we study. We can expect new ways of seeing things, new settings for their display, and new problems to tackle. Put another way, our capacity to wonder is stimulated by the possibilities the new forms of representation suggest. So the arts in this way give us space to notice, to trouble, and to reconfigure our view and ways of being. The arts stimulate a pulse and a response to act pedagogically.